Hi everybody, welcome to the Basic Stitch Knitting Podcast. This is episode 21. This is going to be a section I always ignore, and that is to introduce this podcast. This is a podcast about my knitting journey, and I'll talk about what I've been knitting on, what I've finished. That's not very usual, and a little bit of chit-chat about my life, mainly about knitting still. I am Celine, coming to you from Hong Kong. I can be found on Ravelry as Ochia, O-C-H-Y-A, and on Instagram as basic.stitch.knitting. There is a group for this podcast in Ravelry, and it's Basic Stitch Knitting Podcast. I mean, just look up in the group tab or forum tab, Basic Stitch Knitting Podcast. Yeah, that's it. Oh, by the way, before starting the podcast, I would like to announce the winner for the giveaway of this Rosea by Lily beautiful bag. So, I have typed your names in a Word document and assigned numbers to all of your names who have typed enter last episode, and the random number generator chose this lucky winner, and if your name is Samantha Nelson, congratulations. This is now yours. Again, it has a notion pouch in there. The bag is pretty big because, as you can see, I kind of put like 4 whips in here. Of course, very crunched up. So yes, if you're Samantha Nelson, Samantha, please get in touch and let me know your address so that this can get to you ASAP. Congratulations again. I have tried and succeeded in putting all the whips in this bag that I'm going to talk about in this episode. And this wonderful, beautiful, well-made bag is by Rosea by Lily. And yeah, it's a drawstring bag. And so the first whip I'm going to talk about is this. This is my entry, my spiritual entry for the Funky Cowl, the Funky Knit Along. And it's a hat. I only have this much left for my first skein, and if you do remember, I have 2 skeins of this. So the yarn for this project is Peyton's Merino Extra Fine DK color, and I have had this skein of yarn, like 2 skeins of this yarn, for a long time, and I just didn't know what to do about it, so I thought, well, let's have a funky cowl to encourage us to try to really find a way to knit with those skeins of yarn that we have no idea what they can become. And this is what I'm making. This is going to be a hat, and it's called B to the 3. B to the 3 hat, I guess. Yeah, B to the 3 hat. I'm going to write the name down here and also the designer. It's looking really pretty. It's definitely not what I expect, because it kind of reminds me of those like self-striping yarn for socks, and a little bit like, you know, like West Yorkshire Spinners kind of sports weight or DK weight kind of sock yarn. I think it's very pretty, and the reason why I find it funky, I guess, was because it came in this shape, and it doesn't remind me of the usual self-striping sock yarn. You know, if it's self-striping sock yarn, I always feel like, well, I can always knit a pair of socks, because I don't care how funky they are. But this is DK weight, it's like 100% merino wool. You know, it's like, it's not gonna be a pair of socks, so... And I have 2 skeins of it. I just don't know what to do with it. And then after talking about the cowl last episode, I went to Ravelry and looked for just DK weight yarn that requires, you know, 2 skein of this. 1 skein is 131 yards, so I was just looking for, you know, a pattern of 240 meter or like 232 yards of, you know, DK weight skeins. And I found this pattern, and it's like a simple brioche or brioche hat pattern. B to the 3, I guess it's no, it's not my guess. It actually means basic brioche beanie. So B to the 3. And this is my first attempt to do brioche in the round, and I must say I am enjoying it so far. It's like you know, back then when I first started to watch, it may be like, you know, 2 to 3 years ago, everybody was knitting brioche, and you know, everybody's saying like, you know, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, to wagon or wagon, to knit brioche. But for me, it's like, you know, I can't even see the ghost of the bandwagon anymore, because people just don't, I mean, people just don't talk about that a lot anymore. I don't know, I'm not very good at, you know, following trends and stuff, and I tried to understand brioche knitting by following the pattern by Stephen West before, like a free pattern called syncopated whatever hat, brioche hat, and I totally did not understand the pattern. Like, it's not for beginners. So I tried again. I talked about trying to knit brioche on the flat by using this pattern, like Valerie's pattern called Memories Brioche, or Brioche Memories. And then the pattern is so good in the sense like it explains everything. It even tells you those things that people assume you would know, but basically there will be no way you could know, like how to pass the stitches and what is counted as one stitch, and how to see, like how to recognize that stitch that you're going to slip, you know, little things like that. And although I kind of failed in my first or second attempt to knit the Brioche Memories, probably because I wasn't using the right yarn, right color, I couldn't really see what I was doing, or I wasn't in the state of mind to do it, but I'm definitely going to try again. It just gives me a really good foundation to understand what brioche is. And although brioche in the flat and the round are different, it just makes me, you know what brioche stitches, you know, at least what bark, a brioche bark stitch is actually like. So I would say if you have been struggling with brioche, and you have been looking at videos and patterns and you still don't understand it, I would say, you know, try the brioche Memories pattern. Like, it's very, very detailed, and I just think it's a very good tutorial pattern. It's totally worth the price, and it's not even expensive. You know, when I was knitting this hat, the expression to describe my experience is definitely 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You know, because once you have made some mistake, I just had to go back and think back, and I don't know what happened. Basically what happened was, this is my beginning of round. Like, if you were doing brioche in the round, I would suggest that you do not put the stitch marker on the needles to denote the beginning of round. I would just put the stitch under, you know, on one stitch on this first stitch. See what I mean? This is the beginning of the round. This is the first stitch of the round, and it's good enough that you can recognize, whoops, that's the first stitch of the round. Like, I don't really need it to be on the needle, because it will kind of confuse me, or, you know, just very fiddly when I begin a new round when it comes to brioche knitting. And I think I should talk about the pattern first, and then I would like to share with you some tips that I've learned while knitting brioche in the round. If you're an expert, you can totally skip that part, but I just like to talk about it in case, you know, you have always been unsure about brioche knitting. Super squishy, by the way. So the pattern B to the 3 hat, it requires 90, it's a free pattern, by the way. It requires 90 stitches for the cast on. I think I did just a normal German twisted cast on, which is old Norwegian cast on, like supposed to be quite stretchy. So if you go to the pattern, and then there will be like a comment tab, a lot of the time the comment tab isn't a very useful source for, you know, instructions or for recommendation for modification. It's just a place for people to say thank you for the project. It looks so beautiful, and I have had downloaded, like, paid for a pattern that in the comment everybody was talking about how beautiful the pattern is, like, thank you for designing this. But when I read the actual pattern, it's like so not helpful, and it is by a famous designer. It's like the worst pattern I've ever seen. I think I talked about that pattern in the podcast before, but you can't see that in the comment. Like, nobody is complaining. Well, actually, after buying it, somebody actually complained about the pattern there, like saying this is like the worst pattern. Just because somebody can knit doesn't mean you can design a pattern, you know, like things like that. I mean, I wish I read that before. But what I'm trying to say is usually the comment section is not very useful, except for this pattern, because the designer, Megan Schmaltz, is very present throughout, and I think it's just really good that she provides really good like pattern support. So the pattern asked for 90 stitches cast on, and somebody was saying after knitting quite far into it, she realized that 90 stitches are too big for her. And the designer said the decrease on the crown is done in like 20 stitches plus 10. I don't know how it works yet, but basically it means every repeat is 20 stitches. And for the decreased crown, you need to add 10 stitches. So it means if you can't do 90 stitches cast on, if you want it to be smaller, you can do a multiple of 20 plus 10. And the smaller size than the 90 stitches would be then 70, because it will be like 20 times 3, that is 60, and plus 10, that's 70. But she said, you know, you might find 70 too small for you, so because that's 30 stitches smaller, so you might just want to go down a size, or you know. And I think for the brim part, like the pattern did recommended 3.5 stitches here, and for the body part it's like 4 millimeter, 3.5 millimeter and 4 millimeter. And what I did is I did like 3.25, and now I've switched to 3.5. And if I would say, I would definitely do even a smaller size. Like I won't even do 3.25. I'll probably go to 3 at least for the brim, because so far it's pretty large. And let me try if I could show you how large it is, but it's not too bad. I mean, like, it's very loose, but it's not like the kind of loose that will be like the head will be blown away if there is a strong wind. I think it will stay okay on my head, and it might even fit like my boyfriend or just a man with a bigger head. I use, again, 3.25, and now I'm switching to 3.5, but I totally don't think I really need to switch to 3.5. But the reason why I switched to 3.5 was because I was thinking, if this won't be a hat, then it can be a cowl, can it? Like, let me try. I need to take off my... Oh no! I can't really, because this is too small, this is too tight. Anyway. It seems like it's going to be a hat because I feel like it's better on hat than in here. What do you think? It's slightly too funky as cowl, I think. And I want to learn how to do like decreasing, you know, in brioche, so a hat it will be. And yeah, I have this much left. And oh, by the way, for 2 skeins of yarn, if I'm just knitting plain stockinette, it will be too much. But we all know brioche stitch kind of take up, you know, like as much as like 2 times the amount of yarn that you will need for plain stockinette. So 2 skein of this will, I guess, make a brioche hat only, which is what I want, like, because I really wanted to use up the yarn. But that was what I was feeling, because now when I see it, like, it's so beautiful. I'm actually kind of curious to know how it actually looks in stockinette stitch. Oh, I hope you kind of have that kind of like, you know, experience as well. You know, a funky yarn turn out to be something that you actually like. And I don't know when I should like start to decrease. Should I decrease now already? Because I probably won't be like folding it up, so I don't want it to be very slouchy, so I guess maybe I should start to decrease already, right? I have knitted quite a bit of like slouchy hat accidentally, and they're too slouchy and too hipstery that whenever I wear it, my boyfriend just doesn't want to walk next to me. But my slouchy hat usually fit him quite well, like as a proper hat. So that is my first project, and let me see in my project note to see if I have anything else I'd like to add about the pattern. Oh yes, I talked about sharing about the tips. My first tip is about how to read the stitches when you are knitting brioche in the round. And if you're knitting brioche, remember if there is like a yarn over, this is how they look. And if you know there's a yarn over on top of a stitch, they're counted as one stitch. So the basic construction of a brioche cowl or hat or brioche anything in the round is that there will be 2 rows of setting up rows, and they usually call it row 1 and row 2. And afterwards it's like row 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. And some people call it like, you know, row A, row B, row A, row B. Basically you need 2 rows to form, you know, the brioche stitch, 1 brioche row. And so after this, I'm going to talk about row 3 and row 4. If I talk about row 3 and 4, you kind of understand I mean, you know, the first row and the second row of the actual brioche stitch. So row 3 is usually the bark row, and row 4 is the burp row. Bark actually means brioche knit, and burp means brioche purl. And sometimes you just put down your project and you don't remember whether you have just done bark row or burp row, or you know whether you should continue to do burp or to bark, whether it's 3rd row or 4th row. It will be much easier, and I wouldn't say much easier, but just essential for you to be able to read the pattern, as in read your stitches to know what you've done. So this is the beginning of the new row. Like what I said, I don't put the stitch on the needle, I just put it on this like first stitch. Let's look at these stitches. Those stitches with a yarn over on top of it are both those stitches you're gonna either to bark or to burp. And those lone stitch, you know, without a yarn over on top, are going to be the stitches you're going to slip. And this is the key. If the lone stitch looks like a knit stitch, you know, a V below, immediately below it, then it means you have just done the bark stitch. You have just knitted, brioche knitted. So what you're gonna do now on this row is you're going to do the the burp stitch, meaning you're going to do row 4. Okay, let me knit across a little bit of this so that you can see how it looks like after I've done the 4th row pattern, like the burp row. Oh, before showing you how the row 4 is going to look like, I'm going to take this opportunity to show you how to change from row 3 to row 4, because row 3 will end with a slip stitch. You know, slip 1 yarn over here. Slip 1 yarn over, so the yarn over the yarn will be in front of the work, and then there will be the stitch that you just slip purlwise. Okay, and then the beginning of row 4, this is row 3, right? The beginning of row 4 will ask you to slip 1 again and then start to burp. And before you burp, you need to slip slip 1 yarn. You need to put the yarn forward as well. So you have already put the yarn forward and slip 1. That is slip 1 yarn over. When you choose to slip this one, the yarn is already at the front. So if you're like me, you would be thinking, do I need to put the yarn in the front again, like to wrap the stitch again to slip this one? And the answer is yes. You know, you need to wrap it again. And I can't wrap it in your direction. I would just need to, like, you know, the yarn is already at the front, right? I need to wrap again and bring the yarn to the back, to the front, and slip purlwise. And that will be the first stitch of the 4th row. And then because I'm going to burp, which is brioche purl, I need to, again, the yarn is already in the front, right? Bring it to the outside of the right yarn, right needle, and pull it, bring it to the front again, and purl it. This is how you do a burp roll. And I can keep doing it. by the way, I'm knitting this on higher sharp, and the needle, my needle is like 5 inches long, and I'm using the cable of 40 centimeter, I would say 40 centimeter, and it does not make sense at all. It makes the worst experience, and I just hope people, you know, it makes me want to buy higher 4 inches needles, because I want to knit hat with you know, like short cables, but knitting hat with 5 inches needles plus 40 centimeter cables are just the worst experience one can ever ask for. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how a barb row actually looks like if you have already barbed. Like, this is where we were at just now, right? And then now you can see these stitches with a yarn over as a stitch. If you come across them again later on, you're going to, you know, either bark or burp it. And how do you decide whether you're going to bark or burp it? You look at the lone stitch. And the lone stitch now has a bar across it, horizontal bar, right below the live stitch. And it means it's a purl stitch. It looks like a purl stitch, right? If the stitch that you're about to slit looks like a purl stitch, it means this is going to be, like this next row that you're going to work will be a bark row. It's going to be an opposite, you know, like if you see a purl, then you're going to knit. If you see a knit stitch, you're going to purl the stitch. I hope that makes sense to you. And I hope this is not too, you know, fundamental beginner for you guys. And next in my big project bag is a hat. It was, let me show you before saying anything. And it's difficult to show because there are like million of needles on it. And this is my Braid Hat. Do you guys remember it? It's a very lightweighted and springy hat. Sorry for the clinking needles. It was, did I show you the wrong side? Of course I did. This is the right side, and it was a UFO since last year. Not because I didn't like to knit on it, but because I ran out of yarn and I had to go buy another skein of this navy yarn from Cascade 220 fingering weight. So just a recap, I think, I don't even remember. Okay, can you see different shades of blue here? Because they are definitely different blues. I don't even remember the construction of this yarn because that's, you know, last year. I don't remember where I started. I think I started here, I think, and then go up to here, and then pick up stitches for this, I think. So, this part, the first skein of navy, is from the New Zealand yarn company or farm called Briar Patch, and then they have this like Tatoko Station 4-ply yarn. Talked a lot about it in back episodes, and then I ran out of it and I changed to Cascade 220 fingering in the colorway In the Navy. The colorway name is called In the Navy and not Navy. I think there are two different colorways. And then this is Cascade 220, I think Golden Olive, and Cascade 220, right? So this is a free pattern that I was doing test knitting for Blackers yarn, and the pattern name is called Braid Hat, and it's a half hat. Okay. And the last step of this needle, the shawl or the hat, is I need to do these things that we call, what's called, by the way, look at these things. Oh my goodness. It's called, let me think. It is applied border. Yep, applied border. So where basically you start from here, you pick up a stitch here, and then you knit one row, and then back, pick up another stitch on the yellow side, and then do this and pick up another stitch here. And yep, it's pretty long and it's quite fun to knit, to be honest. And because I watched the tutorial by Kay Jones, I used two different sets of needles one set to hold the yellow live stitch, mustard live stitch, and then I use the right size needles to knit the border. So the size of this needle doesn't even matter anymore. And I increased in a size, I use like size 5mm for the edge. This is 5mm, US 8 Eddie needle. First of all, this is if you're interested in knitting this pattern, do I need to have a little bit more light? I think so. Okay. So if you're going to knit this pattern, do remember this panel is going to be a garter stitch pattern. It means you knit like the pattern, and then when you go back, you need to knit and not purl, because if you purl, you're going to produce stockinette stitch panel. And we all know if it's stockinette, it kind of rolled up. And that's what happened, because I knit until here before I stopped. Oh my god, so loud, but please bear with it. The car will soon go away. By the way, I live close to a basketball court, so sometimes you may hear, people playing basketball. I think that's fun. So I knit till here, and then I stopped, and it was perfect. And then I picked up again recently, and I forgot. I mean, I read the pattern and I didn't read it, read but not read. So I forgot, and then I purl all the way back, and form like stockinette panel. And the problem with it is that part seems to curl back quite a bit, and I feel like I'm going to need to, like block it quite aggressively when it comes to, blocking the stitches. But to be honest, I totally was not going to rip back and knit again, because no one can see, that's the perks of knitting in darker color yarn. No one can see. So that's the first reminder if you're ever going to knit this very beautiful Braid free pattern, Braid Hat free pattern. And then I'd like to talk about my experience with Eddie, the red cable Eddie. I don't really know the name, because I know they have many different names, like Turbo Lace or Sock Turbo. They just have many different names, and no matter how hard I go online and look at their official website to try to understand which is which, I just have no clue. I just talk about, I would just say the Eddie needle with the red cable. And you all know I love my Eddie needles, like they are my favorite, and most of the time I even prefer it to my Haya, because like Haya when it's like 2.5 for sock needles, it's just too sharp for me. And meanwhile, I just love using Eddie red cable for knitting socks. And I thought I would love it forever. I would always love it for whatever size, which is not true, because now that I feel like when you're knitting, this pattern, lace, you kind of have to do a lot of like, knit together, slip knit. You have to do a lot of that. And while this is not bad, I could totally imagine how sleek and how much better the experience would be if I'm using Haya needles. So my verdict is this. I prefer Eddie needle, Eddie red cable, whenever it's like, very small needles, 2, 2.5, 3.5, or maybe even 4. I prefer Eddie cable. But, sorry, but if it comes to like 4.5 or even like 4, 4.5, 5, I would prefer Haya needles. Okay, and actually after, using it for a long, for a while, I kind of get used to not poking the needle tip. So it, Haya actually gets better and better. But for 2.5, like for sock needles, totally not Haya. It's just too sharp for me. So yes, I shall let you see. Oh, by the way, fun things. When I was wrapping this, because my boyfriend has never seen this in real life, and the other day I was like, when he was shaving, I just wrapped this, and bring it to the toilet and be like, does it look good? Does it look good? And he was like, I like it. I like the color. He really likes the color, but he didn't know why. And then a moment later, he said, because it's Leeds United color. He supports a football team or soccer team, Leeds United. Is it called Leeds United? Maybe it's not even the real name, but it's from Leeds, okay? I don't watch football. I just don't care. but he says like, this is the color of Leeds United, and I immediately Google it. I would say Leeds United have like yellow and white and blue, but sometimes it's different shades of blue, sometimes it's different shades of yellow, and the thing is like it's not even standardized within the football club. Like, how is that possible? Because I feel like, you know, say for example, if you're Gryffindor, it's really, it does really matter what shade of red, like maroon, or what shade of yellow or gold you're using. I mean, I know in the book and in the movie it's different, but you know, it's not something like yellow, and you know, because there are like many shades of different yellow. Whatever. Leeds United. Okay, so it was like, you know, if I'm in England and if they're going to watch football game, I can wear this one to support Leeds United, and people will feel like I'm the biggest fan, although I've never heard of them before meeting my boyfriend. Like, his family supports Leeds United, but I shall not go into it because what do I know about football? So that's my second whip. And my third whip is going to be Hermione Socks. I don't know, like, I think last episode when I showed you the Hermione Socks, Hermione's Everyday Sock, I'm not sure if I finished it, but at least now I'm finished. This is kind of small, and no, I do not have a sock blocker. It's not exactly Gryffindor color, but you know, I tried my best. And look at the beautiful stitches. For this one, I cast on 56 stitches, and then using German twisted cast on, and 2x2 rips. And I do the pattern on both sides, like the instep and the heel side of the sock. And I use a stitch marker to denote where I started to do the heel flap, because I'm not doing it 2 at a time this time, and I want to be sure where I actually start to do the heel flap so that when I do the second one, they are similar. And then I just do, I love the Eye of Partridge heel flaps, so beautiful. And I do like a kind of rounded heel turn. For links to how to, you know, do different type of heel turn, like a rounded one or the Dutch one, like the square one or whatever, that works with your number of cast-on stitches, please go to my project page because I have put the link to this really useful website. And then I just continue and do a very basic sock decrease. You know, I basically decrease every other row until I reach this. I don't know how many stitches. I should count probably 28 or 26. You know. And this is how it looks. And my stitch, the other sock, I try another kind of cast on, and it is called the cable cast on. If you're interested, please look online because I don't know how to describe it. Basically, you cast on, it's not a long tail cast on, because a Norwegian, old Norwegian or German twisted is still a long tail cast on, meaning you kind of have to estimate how much, like how long the waist yarn you need to be before actually casting on. But the cable one is not that kind of cast on. Like, I only need to, you know, like have a little bit of waist yarn and I can start to do it. Yeah, cable cast on. I thought it would be very stretchy, but when I put them together like this is the new cast on, the cable cast on, then this is old Norwegian cast on. Okay, to be honest, they're similar. Are they similar? No, actually, I could totally feel that the old Norwegian cast on is definitely more stretchy, like stretchier than the cable cast on. But this is, you know, stretchy. Not as stretchy, but still stretchy. The yarn is all Drops Fable sock yarn. And the pattern is, again, Hermione's Everyday Sock. And my boyfriend loves it. Like, he's like, it really looks beautiful. Very simple, very beautiful. Yeah. That's my third whip. And my fourth whip is going to be my Zweig pattern, but I do not have it with me now, but I will put a little bit of footage on the video because I didn't bring it with me today. I would say I didn't actually knit a lot since last time that I showed you. If you could see the stitch marker there, that's where I stopped last time. Like, that's where I showed you last time. And the reason being, I'm actually, to be honest, getting a little bit bored of it. Like, the body and then the X crosses. Starting to get bored already, but there are still 2 sleeves to go. I don't know, maybe I just need to put it aside. I know I really want to wear it. I know I really want to soak it, at least to see how the stitches will behave. But I feel like I'm now in my most polygamous stage in my life. I just can't focus on one project. You know, I have to, you know, cast on many things and go from one project to another all the time. So that is my fourth whip that I'm knitting, and my fifth whip is my Harvest cardigan. So you can't see it's a cardigan yet. I only use this to denote the this is the right side. First of all, the pattern is Harvest by Tin Can Knits, and it's a free pattern, and it's my first cardigan that I'm going to knit in my life, and I feel like it's a easy choice, and it's a you know, my first sweater is Flax Sweater by Tin Can Knits, and it was a really good pattern. It guided me to knit my first sweater, and I feel like, you know, if I'm going to knit cardigan for the first time, I'm definitely going to knit from Tin Can Knits again, because first of all, I know a lot of people have knit from it. I can get a lot of help if I'm stuck, but I don't feel like it's very likely. And second of all, it's just a very, very good beginner pattern and very, you know, simple look. And this is going to be a cardigan that I knit for my aunt. And you start with knitting like a garter stitch panel from here to here. And I was like, you know, garter stitch easy, because I have improved so much since I first started to knit, or first learned how to knit, which is to knit like a garter stitch scarf. So it's gonna be like pristine, but I made a mistake. I made mistakes somewhere, I don't remember where, and that's good. Yeah, basically, I forgot to do like maintain the garter stitch, and for some, like, there's like 2 stitches I accidentally did like stockinette, so I had to go back down and, you know, mend the stitch. And I only realized then that I do not know how to mend a garter stitch, because since I graduated from my garter stitch garter stitch scarf, I've never done garter stitch anymore, like only a little bit, maybe, like flat, you know, it means you knit on both sides. I've never done it anymore, so I learned how to pick up stitches, but I learned how to pick up stitches from, you know, for stockinette only, like on the right side, on the wrong side, I know how to pick up stitches, but I actually don't know how to pick up stitches in garter stitch panels, so I looked online on YouTube again for a tutorial, and the harder bit is definitely to pick up the stitch at the edge stitch. I'm not even sure if I know how to do it for stockinette stitch, but I know if I one day need to know how to do it, I will definitely have, like, you know, YouTube video to help me with that. But now that I know how to pick up stitches, it kind of look a little bit wonky, the side edge, even after I pick it up, but at least I know how to do it. And in my book, if you don't know how to correct a mistake, you don't actually know how to do it. So, you know, the kind of confidence you gain through being able to know, oops, you know, I made a mistake, no problem, I can go back. And that's how I feel about garter stitch now. But because I really don't knit a lot of garter stitch, I feel like next time if I'm going to mend the problem, I'll need to go look for a tutorial again. Anyway, so you start with this, and then you pick up stitches, you know, you start with provisional cast on. So after knitting the last stitch, you go back and pick up stitches along the selvage stitch, and then you pick up the live stitches on the provisional cast on, and then you start to put stitch marker to divide the what do you call it? The sleeves and the back and the front. You keep increasing, and this is how big it is. It's going to be like this. And this is not my size, this is my aunt's size. I'm knitting 43, I guess. The pattern asks for a 5mm needle. I tried swatching the stitch for 4.5, 5, and 5.5. I like the fabric for 5 the most, definitely. 5.5 a little bit too holey even after blocking it. This yarn does bloom a little bit and fill in the space. Cascade 220, by the way, worsted non-superwash. And it does fill the gap. after blocking, washing, soaking. But still 5.5 needles for stockinette on the flat. It's still a little bit too loose for my preference. 4.5 looks good, but it feels like it's a bit dense, which is fine, but it also means I need to knit way more stitches if I'm going to knit a bigger size. So I thought I would go with 5. But, you know, for the size my aunt is looking for, and I tried to, you know, like, you know, calculate my, I tried to count my gauge and see how I can fit it into the pattern. And if I'm using my gauge, which was 19 stitches per 4 inches, and the pattern calls for 18, I think, then I will need to cast on a size for 41 inches, which is not in the pattern. But if I do 4.5 millimeter needles, and then my stitch count will be 20 per 4 inches, and all I need to knit is like the size for 43 inches, which is in the pattern. So and I'm lazy to do more calculation because her like stitches for division is not actually proportionate to the size. It's not like the bigger the size, the more stitches for the sleeves. It's not. If you look at the pattern, you will understand what I mean. So I really don't know how to deal with that part. So I decided to go for 4.5 millimeter needles to serve my gauge. And then I'm going to knit 43 stitches size. That's 43 inches size. I'm not sure if that's like, you know, that makes any sense to you. You have to kind of have the pattern with you. Anyway, in short, that pattern jumps from 39 inches to 43 inches, I think. So I'm doing 43 inches with more number of stitches, you know, in summary. And I really like this pattern, and I have this left. I mean, I only have this left only because, for this game, because I have knit like 3 swatches for this pattern, which is like my most devoted knitting experience so far. I guess it's because it's not for me, you know, it's for somebody, and I really want it to fit properly. Oh, and can you see the mistake here? This is very, very blatant. Like, I forgot to maintain the integrity of the stitches. I forgot to maintain garter stitch, and I did a little bit of stockinette there. Am I going to go back? No. So, yes. And then I've already wound up the next skein. I'm not going to pull out the whole thing here, but you can see it's Cascade 220. Can you see it? Yeah. Cascade 220. So that's my last whip for this episode. I hope you enjoy them. I don't have any FO. And I'm just in that stage where I have to cast on a lot of things to keep things going. And better yet, like, those things have had to be quite mindless because I spent a lot of morning, you know, waking up a little bit earlier, and then I knit a few rows, and then I made a mistake. I have to like ting back or just rip back, and then it's like go back to ground zero. Many mornings like that, and I just can't deal with it. I want like really simple things, okay? So yes, that's it for my knitting journal. Oh, by the way, so 2 weeks ago, one of you asked me about my name, like, why is it Celine? Is there any story with it? And the person who asked the question is a Celine herself. And she was like, I hope this doesn't offend you, you know. No, questions like that don't offend me. Although the story about this, I feel a little bit embarrassed. Basically, as Chinese, a lot of us are not born with a Christian name. I don't even know why it's called Christian name. It's Celine Christian. It's not even in the Bible. Anyway, like an English name, you know, like not Asian name. I must say some of my friends are born with an English name and it's on their ID card, but it's not the case for me. So as long as your name is not in your ID card, you can always change it. You can decide it yourself. Your parents can choose a name for you, and then you can change it anytime you want, but it will be a little bit awkward because, like, if you're changing from like a very cool, like, you know, more like a middle sex, can I say, like androgynous name, like Kenny or Vince, and then you go to uni and you suddenly change to like Rosalind, like a more feminine name, people will feel like, oh, maybe you want to reinvent yourself and make sure you're more like girly or whatever. You know, that kind of awkward talking But if you change your name early enough, like in primary school or whatever, it usually will be fine. So I was originally Joyce when I was in primary school. I didn't actually have an English name when I was, when I was in Malaysia because it wasn't required. But after coming back to Hong Kong, my English teacher wanted an English name, so I thought Joyce would be good. Just because, when I was younger, when I was playing Barbie with my friend, I was always called Joyce. My Barbie was always called Joyce for no reason. So I was Joyce until the end of primary 6 last year in primary school. I started to go to ICQ, if you know what that is. And then I met people online, like not really meeting them in real life, but we chat about things that we're interested in. And I used Celine as my name. And where did I get it? I get it from, you guessed it, Celine Dion. I wasn't like the biggest fan, still not her biggest fan, but I would say I like her enough. And then Celine Dion is a very beautiful name. It's still a very beautiful name to me. So I chose Celine as my online name, and people who actually, the first bunch of people who call me Celine and knew me by the name Celine were actually my online friends. And then I moved to another school in secondary school, and I was then officially Celine Chen. And I don't know what my primary school mates felt about it, but we're not really in touch anymore with a lot of them. But I was Celine since then. I was 13 years old, and that's how I got my name. But I don't know why I felt slightly embarrassed when people asked why Celine. I mean, I'm in the stage of life where I'm generally very comfortable with where I'm coming from, like, who I am. I'm way more comfortable with myself now. But a few years back then, when people asked me why I was Celine, I would say like, oh, I didn't choose it myself, my friend chose it for me, as if that will take the responsible off me. Because if I chose a name myself, it feels like I really like that name. And if it's actually something that's not that good, I feel like I need to bear the responsibility of choosing that name. I'm not sure if you actually understand. So I was like saying my friend chose it or my parents chose it. And as silly as it sounds like, I was actually worried that I might accidentally set different stories. And, I was kind of worried that people would come back to me. But last time you said it was your friends, not your parents. So silly. I don't even understand myself back then. But that's what happened. So I am Celine. I chose it myself because I find the name very beautiful. Even if you don't agree, it's fine. And I'm really happy that I got to choose my name anyway. And to make it less pretentious, I make sure I don't put the accent on this E, because I do know friends who put accent on their name, and I'm like, oh, that's very pretentious if you're not French. So yes, that is my name for Celine. And by the way, if you're interested in anything about me, don't feel bad about asking. I mean, because people feel like I might feel offended by your question, but most probably I'm not, so you can always ask away. Or do you like to have like a thread in Ravelry called like Ask Me Anything kind of group, so that you can ask me anything about knitting, about myself, about Hong Kong, about things that I can answer, even my experience in Italy and stuff like that. I mean, if I can answer you, I will totally be happy to answer you, because as what I said, I'm so much more comfortable with who I am now, where I am at now. I don't know. So yeah. Just a thought. Okay, next on my show notes, I like to talk about one of the knitting goals that I did not reach in the year of 2017. I set out some goals, knitting related goals, including, knitting several garments, like sweaters, which I did. I knit 3. Not a lot when compared to like, sweater knitting machines, for example, Amy from the Stranded Knitting podcast. But it was good enough for me. And then I knit toy, which was something I wanted to do, and then I learned how to do stranded knitting. I did not only learn how to do stranded knitting, I did quite a lot of it. But there was this knitting goal that I did not achieve, and that is to teach somebody to knit. I did teach my friend to knit socks, but it's not really teaching her to knit, because it's more like showing her the right videos to start with, like YouTube tutorials to start with, and she knows how to knit in the first place, so it's not really like teaching. But this year I definitely decide to do it, and I said I wanted to teach refugee kids to knit, because Hong Kong is not a very affordable city. Hong Kong is not a very affordable city, and a lot of asylum seekers, they come to Hong Kong with their kids, or they have their babies when they're in Hong Kong. I don't even want to go into, I mean, if you're interested, you can ask me, I can talk about it, but it's going to be a very long video. But the system, the government is definitely not helping. The government doesn't want any asylum seeker in Hong Kong, but they did nothing to actually stop them from coming to Hong Kong. So there are just a lot of asylum seekers in Hong Kong who are like trapped in this system, in this city, a very, very expensive city, especially when they can't work legally in Hong Kong. Like, the law doesn't allow them to work in Hong Kong. So they only had a little bit of money from the government, which is, I would say, very, very minimal support. And they usually live off, you know, like, they get a lot of assistance mainly from non-governmental charity organizations. So, you know, and their assistance, the money they got, or the material, like, you know, clothes and food and stuff like that, are usually the basic minimal for survival and not for anything more than that. So the kids here do go to schools, but usually they're not going to like that kind of school that will properly equip them for integrating into the society. And extracurricular activities are expensive. You need to buy things, you need to pay like tuition fee and stuff like that. They are not free, and you know, sometimes they might be free when I was in when I was in primary school, but still you have to buy something, you know, like needles or yarn to learn to knit, for example. And I think that is really bad. I mean, for kids to learn something, to acquire a hobby, to deal with their anxiety, and to very productively overcome their boredom, I think that is very important. And if they can't do it, I would say, like, boredom is not a small thing. It affects a child self-esteem. I just feel like it's important, you know. And I love knitting. I know what knitting has done to me. I know it calms me. It helps me to fight boredom, anxiety, or sadness. It's really good for mental health. Let's just agree on that. And I've heard that, you know, the connection or the coordination of your eyes and your fine finger movement when you're knitting, when you're looking at it, it kind of actually has a very good like psychological effect on you, especially if you have suffered from PTSD or, you know, just distress in life. So I thought it's a good cause to actually teach a knitting class. And there is this organization in Hong Kong called Refugee Union. It's a very special organization because most of the organizations in Hong Kong are like founded by other people who help the refugees or asylum seekers, forced migrants. But Refugee Union is the first and only NGO that is founded by the asylum seekers themselves, and they take a very active role to talk about their rights, and they form a community for asylum seekers in Hong Kong to come and talk about the situation that they faced, or the discrimination that they face, prejudices, you know. And you know, this is a place where asylum seekers can come to be understood. And you know, if you're interested, I will put the link to the Refugee Union website. And this is a website they kind of still constantly update it, which is always a good sign. You know, I want to see an active organization. And I contacted them and said I would like to host a knitting class for children. And I've talked to them a year ago, but you know, I was caught up with life and just didn't do it. But this year I just want to do it. And I told them I understand that I will need to be responsible for everything, like the yarn, the tools, and like finding the volunteers and also the money, because organizations like Refugee Union, or even like the organization I worked for briefly before called Justice Center, which was Refugee Advice Center before, previously, when they organized activity for asylum seekers, they will provide travel expenses, because they might travel from another part of the city to the center to participate in the activities. And we like to create an incentive for them to come. And the travel expenses is usually a little bit more generous in relation to the ordinary travel expenses. I mean, the allowance is generally more generous than the expense, because it's actually another way of assistance to them. Like, if you don't get enough help from the government, we kind of want to subsidize them in like little ways like that. And that's what I need to do as well if I'm going to host a knitting knitting class. And I'm totally willing to do that. But I am also thinking, like, if you're interested in helping in making the event possible, because first of all, I plan to provide like 30 Hong Kong dollars for a child, and then a parent who brings a child to the center will receive 60 Hong Kong dollars. And I actually made a calculation here because I can't do it on top of my head. So 30 plus 60, you know, let's assume they're all really young kids and there will always be a parent to bring them here. So it's 90 Hong Kong dollars. And if there are 10 students, which is my targeted number, that is 90 times 10, 900. And then so far there will be 3 classes, like once every month. So it's like 900 times 3. So it's 2,700 Hong Kong dollars. 2,700 Hong Kong dollars is approximately 250 British pounds and 345 US dollar. And you know, it's not like a lot, but it's also not like nothing. So I'm still thinking, you know, I will want to raise funds from people, from my friends, and if you're interested, I would be really, really grateful if you could contribute a little bit as well. I don't know how to say things like this, like I've never really asked for money, but this money I'm not asking for myself, and I hope my explanation just now, you know, make you feel like you understand the situation of the children of asylum seekers in Hong Kong, and if you wish to help, please get in touch and I'll totally find out a way to do it. Like, I don't care how much it is, but the problem is because I've never done anything like this before. I don't know the mechanism of like donation, you know, like through PayPal or I don't know, but if you are interested in supporting the cause and helping me to host this knitting class for the children of asylum seekers in Hong Kong, maybe you can just leave a comment down below, or just, you know, like, I don't know. I hope in the next episode I will have a more solid plan to tell you how that could be done, like, you know, about tax refunds and stuff like that. Oh my god, I'm like the worst person in like fundraising. Anyway, so yes, that is what I'm going to talk about the knitting class.
So what are we about to see today?
Little piggies.
Hello. Hello, Piggy. Hello, Piggy.
You want food, Anna? Want some food? Hello, piggy.
It's a happy piggy.
Piggy, huh? Saying, where's the food?
No food, no food. Oh, is it? Oh, no.
Let it lick you.
No, I don't.
Mama pig. They're growing up fast. It used to be like a little baby.
There's one here.